Welcome to Human Rights Asia Weekly Roundup. These are the stories for this week's special program on recent measures taken against non-governmental organizations in Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Sri Lanka, 3 government ministries issue separate warnings to NGOs. India, government colludes with corporate entities to undermine civil rights movement. Bangladesh, government attempts to control NGO funding and activities. And in Nepal, government brings foreign aid policy to control the work of NGOs and INGOs. Welcome to Human Rights Asia Weekly Roundup. I'm Ansar Stianes. Several Asian governments have proposed legislation and other methods to restrict the functioning of non-governmental organizations. In recent decades, many non-governmental organizations have developed throughout Asia. They are performing important functions in many areas, such as in children's welfare, the promotion of women's equality and women's rights, and dealing with issues relating to environmental rights. Their work relates to civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. Among other things, NGOs contribute to the improvement of people's awareness of their own rights. NGOs also help to improve critical thinking in society so that people can engage in the discourse on development issues as well as other political issues. The objections of the government are an attempt to suppress critical opinions about government plans and programs without adequate concern for the public interest. One of the major issues of concern for the public is the theft of public resources due to corruption and abuse of power. A further desire of the government is to gain a monopoly over the use of foreign funds so that such funds can be used in any manner that the governments want. The proposed laws are directed towards, on the one hand, restricting the space available for NGOs to work on various social issues, and on the other, restricting the fund being received by the NGOs from foreign donors. In Sri Lanka, the Ministry of Defense and Urban Development issued a notice through one of the agencies functioning under it, advising NGOs not to hold press conferences, workshops, or training for journalists, and to stop disseminating press releases. This notice also imposed a condition of registration under the Ministry of Defense if any NGO is to be allowed to function. Following the protest that arose against this directive by the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued a further notice attempting to create the impression that such restrictions are already within the law. Later, a further public notice was issued by the Ministry of Finance and Planning, instructing the public that all the funds coming from foreign donors should come to the government and should be distributed through a government consolidated fund. All these directives came under severe criticism and protest from many NGOs. They warned that they will ignore all such directives as they go against the basic freedoms of expression and association. However, there is serious concern that the government has plans for silencing all those who express independent opinions and that the government wants to control all civil society organizations. Even though India's independence from colonial rule is the product of the civil rights movement, the government of India is not known for its willingness to face criticism about its human rights record. The bureaucracy often portrays civil society as foreign-funded anti-national entities, a sentiment repeated by politicians. Civil society organizations in India work with the mandates of what they demand from their government, that is, to be accountable, transparent, and democratic. However, there are exceptions, including some corporate entities that claim to be part of India's national media, which are biased and corrupt like the country's bureaucracy and politics. Unfortunately, the government uses this as an excuse to portray the civil rights movement in the country as working against national interests. On this subject, we spoke to Mr. Sachin Jain. Sachin heads a reputed human rights organization, Vikas Samvad, and is a state advisor to the Supreme Court Commissioners on the Right to Food, a central issue that cuts across several burning human rights concerns in India, like child malnutrition, forced displacement, mega development projects, deforestation, the environment, and above all, the people's right to form informed opinions and making choice.
In the period of, in the era of neoliberal policies, means maybe in the context of India when we say, it starts from 1991, when Government of India adopted neoliberal policies and they want to do everything which goes in favor of economic development of a particular class in India, not for the country as a whole, not for the most marginalized people of the country. So they have adopted such policies in which they want to sell out natural resources, they want to have big mega developmental projects at any cost. On the other hand, they are not interested in the proper resettlement and rehabilitation of the people, those who are affected due to these mega developmental projects. When the voices of these people are raised in different forums, they are being suppressed. We have laws to control or to monitor foreign funding which is coming to the development organizations and civil society organizations. But when we see that government is seeing that these civil society organizations are raising voices and which is ultimately resulting in expose of the negative impact of mega developmental projects on environment, on people, on society, on culture, they have decided that they will not allow these civil society organizations to work. And that's why these kind of strategies are being adopted by the government of India. I must say in one word, not at all. We have a Panchayati Raj institution. We have decentralized governance system in place, which is mandated by the Constitution of India by 73rd and 74th Amendment, which clearly says that in all the developmental projects, society will be represented and then people will means every person will be heard, means what they want to have and what they want to say. But we are seeing that there have been constant efforts by the respective governments, whether they are state government or whether they are government of India. They have been trying to actually dilute the provisions which are there in the decentralized system related laws. When we talk about mega developmental projects, there is a provision that social impact assessment, environmental impact assessment will be done. And in those processes, community will the community participation will also be ensured by the state authorities. But we see that they have ensured that no people's voice is heard. These laws and systems are being diluted, and they have not been given any space. And when we see the recent happenings, means in one of the case in Orissa, when Supreme Court of India instructed government of India to hear the voice of the 12 Gram Sabhas in Orissa state, means ultimately what we found, all these people from these 12 village councils, they rejected the developmental project, and they said that we don't want to have this development project because it is going to kill our natural resources, it is going to kill our culture, and ultimately government had to withdraw up to a certain extent from that developmental project. But in other hundreds of cases, these particular provisions are not being applied. So in that case, what we see that we have systems in place, we have good constitution in place, but the provisions and the systems are not being applied by the government because there's a nexus of bureaucracy. There's bureaucracy, politicians, and corporates, which is very effective now, and they just want to see these systems are not implemented. So that is one of the reasons why community participation is not ensured strategically. I must say credibility of the civil society organizations is at stake. And about media, it is almost 70% controlled by the big corporate houses. And we can understand the corporate houses, those who have interest in mining, in thermal power, in various big developmental projects which are causing actually losses to the environment and creating a lot of problems for the indigenous society in the country. We definitely see that these media institutions are not going to raise the voices of the people. On the other hand, what the state has been doing in the name of social development, they are also promoting corporate social responsibility, CSR, in which they expect that these big corporate organizations will also put 1 penny of their huge profit for the development of the people. They will run education programs, they will run some nutrition programs, they will run some plantation programs in their project areas. That's why I must say that the biggest issue in front of the civil society section per se is of credibility, because they are not neutral now. They cannot be seen as an institution, those who are taking sides of the people, those who are not influenced by the state policies or the corporate profits. So in that sense, actually, media and even certain amount of civil society organizations, particularly NGOs, are losing their credibility, because they are functioning to protect the interest of these particular corporate sector. So in that sense, actually, it is a time for the civil society organizations to think that what kind of identity they want to have in the larger society. So that is definitely one of the biggest challenge. And we are seeing, on the one hand, government is acting in such a manner where the resources, the financial resources, are limiting to an extent where NGOs do not have any other option other than to go to corporate houses to get financial resources under corporate social responsibility programs, in which they will not be able to raise voices for human rights or the protection of environment or the protection of the people's institutions. So in that sense, actually, it is on the one hand, the state has played a role to limit the space for the neutral and rights-based civil society organizations, and on the other hand, they are opening space for the organizations, those who are willing to go hand in hand with the corporate institutions and the government policies in most of the cases which are against the people, which are not in favor of the people. So it is a complex situation.
The government of Bangladesh attempts to control the country's non-governmental organizations' funding and activities. The Foreign Donations Voluntary Activities Regulations Bill 2014 was adopted by the Cabinet in June this year. The Asian Human Rights Commission has stated that this is an attempt by the government to quash human rights activism. The bill empowers bureaucrats to decide the fate of NGOs and volunteer groups. All individuals or collectives from NGOs to volunteer groups receiving foreign funds for implementing projects will be under constant surveillance under this law. Commentators have expressed worries that the law will usher in even more arbitrary executive actions in Bangladesh. In its current form, the bill empowers bureaucrats to grant registration to NGOs on the basis of satisfaction, and to suspend, cancel, or disband registration for alleged irregularities in any project implemented by an NGO. There is no scope for challenging the government's decision before any court. The government will be able to appoint administrators to sue persons linked to targeted entities. The Secretary to the Office of the Prime Minister will decide the appeal of an aggrieved entity within 30 days, but the decision of the Secretary will be final. The patterns of recent harassment indicate that this law will be both used and abused against human rights organizations. Those reluctant to compromise with the regime will be crushed. We spoke to Zaman at the Asian Human Rights Commission to learn more.
We need to understand one thing, that many of the NGOs, they have been doing lots of innovative work, and Bangladeshi NGOs work contributing to the society and the country very much. At the same time, the NGO activities are required because the public institutions are failing to fulfill the need of the people. So in such a context, the NGOs are bringing the innovative works, and many of the public officials do not have any idea or any clue that how to conceptualize such activities. If these government officials are going to monitor their activities in every month, then they simply don't have any idea how do they run, and the meetings will further make the process complicated in implementing the work instead of helping them. If anybody says that there is a requirement for transparency in terms of corruption in NGOs, of course, that is a necessity in the country. But the way the government is moving, bringing everything under the control of the bureaucrats, it's going to harm the human rights activism very much, and the government's recent pattern of harassing human rights defenders very clearly established that fact that this country is going to face serious consequences if such a law is in place.
Nepal's leading donor agencies have expressed disappointment over the lack of adequate consultation before the government's introduction of the development cooperation policy. Nepal's International Development Partners Group expressed their concern in a written letter to Dr. Ram Sharan Mahat, Minister of Finance. Donors expressed their concern at not being adequately communicated with and not being provided an English version of the draft so that they could have a wider discussion before submission to the cabinet. As a usual practice of policymaking in Nepal, the government included new articles, which were not shared and discussed with the donors during discussions on the policy. In particular, Articles 215 and 218 are concerning as they categorically state that the government will not accept any foreign aid that adversely affects national integrity, sovereignty, social, religious, and ethnic harmony, and national security. Those engaged in carrying out activities against this policy will face legal action. Earlier, we talked to Dipendra Jha, an advocate at the Supreme Court.
I think the control on foreign aid policy, actually the government is claiming that it should, all the foreign aid should go through the government agency rather than giving fund directly to the civil society organization. And this is actually a way to control human rights activism, which is actually needed in Nepali context right now, because the human rights movement is already in a weaker position. There are a lot of regulations imposed by government in Nepal. So I take it like not only controlling human rights monitoring, but also it's a kind of controlling social media, which is emerging as a strong tool for the people to express their views freely. Now we have to tackle this problem in a collective way. Particularly, the human rights monitoring from international organizations is very weak in context of Nepal, particularly after departure of OHR in 2010. So already human rights monitoring mechanism in Nepal is very weak. If this policy is imposed or enacted, I think that will totally ban the human rights activism in Nepal. I think the international community as well as we civil society in Nepal should strongly oppose it, and the donors should agree on this policy of the government, which actually control their freedom as well. So this is a very serious matter for the Nepali human rights activists and overall NGOs, civil society organizations.
The government of Nepal is trying to restrict activities of NGOs and INGOs and limit their ability to mobilize resources for the development and control their human rights work. The new policy also bars donor agencies from earmarking funds for the NGOs and INGOs from the aid amount pledged to the government of Nepal. The policy has also asked NGOs and INGOs to furnish bank details that they use for transactions when submitting project proposals. Nevertheless, this policy has been brought to control the work of NGOs and INGOs in Nepal. That is all for this week's Human Rights Asia Weekly Roundup. For more information, log on to www.humanrights.asia. Thank you for tuning in and see you again next week.